On behalf of the Consortium for Development Policy Research, I welcome you all today on today's symposium on managing monsoons in Pakistan's cities. Greetings everyone. मेरा नाम राफ़े आलम है, मैं माहौलियाती वकील हूँ and पानी पे भी थोड़ा सा काम किया हुआ है, and it's a pleasure to have experts in the field talk about the monsoon. आप लोगों को लाहौर में रहते हुए मुझे आपको मानसून के बारे में कुछ नहीं बताने की ज़रूरत. You know full well how it impacts the city and how it impacts the waterways of the city. What's interesting is how, in the words of Dr. Ayub Qutb, we are all children of the monsoon. The monsoon is a seasonal occurrence that takes place in South Asia, and we are all children of the monsoon in as much as this seasonal occurrence has shaped our history and our politics and very much our culture. This seasonal water outburst is how we clock our seasons and sow our crops and harvest our crops. Understanding the monsoon and controlling it was one of the efforts of the British actually even going earlier than the British colonialists. The Arab ships that used to ply trade to the Far East used to be familiar with the monsoon because of the ravages it brought. And when the British came, they tried to understand the monsoon better and better because it was the ravages of the monsoon that they were dealing with, and much of the famines that they had to, and the droughts they had to deal with, and the millions of people who died as a result, was their inability to understand the monsoon. So this is a historical event that sort of informs us in so many different ways, and today in 2019 affects us and our city and the way we live. Today, to discuss this and aspects of the monsoon, our water system and how it impacts the infrastructure and our health, we have with us Dr. Fawzia Parveen, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Lahore University of Management Sciences. She's associated with the Water Informatics and Technology School over there, and is a former researcher at Oxford University. Dr. Parveen has a background in wastewater treatment analysis and will be helping us understand some context over there. And we're also very lucky to be joined by Mr. Zahid Aziz, the Managing Director of Lahore's Water and Sanitation Agency. Zahid Saab previously was also the Managing Director of VASA Faisalabad and has an immense experience in managing urban infrastructures in Pakistan. So I'll ask you all to join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can I invite Dr. Parveen? I believe you have a presentation, if you want to go through that for us.
So I was looking at the title that is given to my profile, and I have huge disagreements with it, but I'll keep it to myself for the beginning. But I'll tell you why, because I had problems with using the word against monsoon. I also had problems with just figuring out how to deal with monsoon with infrastructure, and I think we'll go about it in a very simpler presentation that I thought would be a nice conversation starter. This picture is from last weekend. So this is in Lahore. So just in a flash, a period of 1 hour flash, hot cats and dogs rain, this is what happens to Lahore. And while a lot of people would look at it as bravery, as resilience, etc., and that I was looking at the comments because this is uploaded on social media, and I was looking at the comments and people are saying beautiful, look at the kids still wanting to go to school and girl child education. And I was thinking complete failure of infrastructure, absolutely no consideration given. And this basically shows our history, that as a city, we never thought about making the city flood-proof or rain-proof. It was never put into design. And imagine that with climate change, it's only going to get worse. And by worst, I don't mean that the monsoons will only get intense. It does mean that at times we'll have extremely dry period as well. So how are we now designing or redefining our cities to deal with this sort of uncertain weather patterns? And I thought a recent picture would help us think and rethink how we're looking at our cities now. So, like I said, I had a huge disagreement with the the sentence that was given right next to my profile, and that's precisely because the only emphasis was put on infrastructure. Whereas a smart city is not only defined by the infrastructure. There are so many elements that are a part of it. So let's say that if a smart infrastructure comes under planning and building, better planning of the city, that then comes under very good policies. And of course, very good policies will only be implemented if there is a good governance system. So this is all much more complicated than that. And then also I think at the center of it is the citizen. How have we educated the citizen to now take care of the cities? So what Monsoon, for any household, like forget the city, just look at the household and think that if there is continuous rain for 2-3 hours and it's very intense, how would you deal with it? So there has to be, I think for every household, rainwater harvesting system. Because what that will do is that you'll collect all the fresh water and any water that is at your disposal and store it. So I would like you to think about storage, because we're not talking about huge storage mechanisms. Generally, the engineers in Pakistan, when they think about storage, it's always dams, dams, dams. But what about small scale storage? Every household storing the little water that they can harvest from rainwater, and then collecting it there. And then also keeping the surfaces impervious. So let's forget what is in old Lahore, because they did not think what the city was going to look like in future. But think about all the housing societies that we're building in Lahore now. They are claiming all the agricultural land. They are making the surfaces more and more impervious. So there's a lot of indirect effect that this building structure is now doing to the cities. So we are completely turning the cities into a city full of impervious surfaces, which means that less and less water can now the groundwater is not able to get a lot of water because all the surfaces are technically impermeable. So all of that, so basically this concept of not just looking at things from the infrastructure point of view, but from the citizen point of view, from a designer point of view, and also, any housing society management position point of view. Look, everybody, if they look at the city as their home, then I think we all need to come out and tell the communities or the municipalities or the authorities that, can you please leave this land behind? Can you just let it be a park, let it be an abundant space and not build anything on it? Now when I was thinking about this, so the first thing that generally you would attach with it is which organizations are responsible for it. So I was thinking about how the flood early warning system management and then post-flood dealing is done in Pakistan. And there was a very, very fresh document which had come out of Prime Minister's office, and it's basically a contingency plan for floods. What it tells you is what is the story of anything else in Pakistan, that on paper and in terms of institutions, we have everything right in place. So the papers tell you exactly what needs to be done. There are institutions that can do it. So from early warning system to then post-disaster management, we have everything clearly laid out. Then, there is a discussion on the performance that I think we can come to. But one thing that I think was clearly missing, and that is to deal with such systems. And I will show you how I think the document did not consider the monsoon period into their flooding map at all. So one of the I was saying that there needs to be protective measures. I'll come back to this in a pictorial presentation that I will give from Peru. But this is basically what the document said. So the Prime Minister's office is aware that floods could come. They're aware that things need to be built up. They're aware that capacities even need to be built, that hazard maps need to be there, that people, if they're being moved, should be taken care of, so on and so forth. So like I said, on paper, everything is perfect. And then with the flood hazard map, I was looking at the map and I thought, from the period, so this is an altogether yearly flood hazard map for all the provinces. And what was alarming was that they say Lahore, XYZ spaces are, there is very little chances of flood. And even if there is flood, it won't affect much. Whereas I think that the way they've looked at it is altogether wrong. because I think at least for the monsoon season, which is July to September, there should be a separate map where they've forecast how much, because we all know that GIS and RS has grown ridiculously and the whole world is predicting weather forecasting. So why couldn't they, for the monsoon period, then produce separate hazard map and say that these are the spaces that are prone, inundated, prone, have a lot of impervious surfaces, and these people could get affected, and then think about why that is the case. Why don't we have the infrastructure to deal with it? And I laugh at how we define, so I look at a lot of systems in Pakistan and I laugh at how we define floods at all. Because when I was at Oxford, when the river level was rising, everybody got an alert on the TV, in the news, everybody was saying, please be careful, do this, do that. So the households that were closer to the flood or the channels were being continuously updated about what could happen if there's an extra torrential rain, how could it. The level of early warning system and management was ridiculous. Whereas for us, for me, for example, to even walk in a flooded street has been such a normal thing. It is not even considered a flood. So I think it comes back to redefining the basic things, like what is flood. Because for us, unless it enters our home and damages absolutely everything, it is not really flood. So I think the government and us as an individuals all together need to relook at things. So this is a picture from Peru, and we all know how Dutch water experts are really good at what they do. So they're basically dealing with water all the time, and they're doing it very well. And in Peru, this flooding happened, and these advisors went to the Peruvian government, and the Peruvian leader said, you know what, let's build more walls. Let's protect our citizens. I'm going to protect all the Peruvians from these floods and its devastations. And then the Dutch expert said, I will tell you one thing, that instead of building more walls, you need to take away more walls. And that is because, for example, even in the case of Lahore, there are streams that were completely associated with rainwater only. So all these perennial streams that would only get recharged when there was rainwater, and there would be a path. So nature had its own way of dealing with things. Nature had provided you a nice stream that would at times flood or take care of the flood when there was excessive rain. Whereas what we have done now is that all those drains have been converted into wastewater drains, which means that when rain happens, where does the rain go then? It will go to the drain, of course, or to even the existing sewage or other drains, but they're all already filled with water. There's no space for them to go. So where will they go? Of course they will stay wherever they have to stay. So I really liked this answer. You know how initially I thought I was going to tell you, let's build more levees, let's do this, let's build dikes and small dams and storage, but then I really love this approach of taking the walls away, giving the river its space, giving the rainwater streams the space that they need. So taking all these encroachments away, even reclaiming more land, and giving more room for them, more space for the water to find its way when the time comes. So because I was referring to the Dutch, this is what they've done in one of their cities. That bridge is the original way that they had left for the river. But when they realized with climate change that things are going to change and the ocean level will suddenly rise, they thought that let us give more room, let us give more space to the river. And again, it's not a highly engineered system. They didn't build a lot of, there would be some sort of levees at the site, but to give water the room, river the room that it needs, all the floodplain that it would have needed in the beginning. And same is the case in all the developed countries. Don't think that we're the only one who suffer from flood. This sea level rise, this rise in temperature is now affecting major cities as well. And we see what all the storms do in America. So we're not the only ones who are getting affected. And mind it, we have to remind ourselves again and again that we cannot completely stop flood. We can deal with it, we can try and manage it, but there would come a time when, depending on how long it rains and depending on how much water we receive, there will come a time when you won't be able to do anything. But what you can do as managers, as practitioners, as individuals who are running their households is to make sure that you create a sort of a sponge and create sort of waterways so that as much as water the household can absorb, whether on your roofs, through the canopy, planting trees, allowing green and impervious surfaces, etc., to then connecting it to a channel, if there is any, and giving it the direction that it would need. But there might come a time when it will go out of your hands, and I think as humans we also need to realize that there's enough amount of control that we can do. So that's what Manhattan's doing as well. Manhattan's trying to now build a U-shaped green space. We all know that it's full of bricks, this space. They have left very little room for green spaces, but now they're trying to rethink how they can design Manhattan to deal with floods if there are any floods. So essentially it's going back to, first of all, seeing what the problem with Pakistan is. For example, I was looking for data and we couldn't find any data, basic data information on, how is the weather, how's the rain pattern changing over the years, how many structures do we have, or channels do we have that could take care of the water. So let's say that there is some water runs off, then do we have the capacity in the channels to take care of that water? If not, then what are we going to do? Shall we build some storage mechanisms somewhere upstream? Or in the beginning of the city, do we give the households rainwater harvesting systems? What do we do so that we have a basic number of, if it rains excessively, we can hold this much water. We can give way to XYZ amounts of water. And then it's going to be, if it rains farther or more than that, then I think the city needs to think about where do we relocate, where do we take all the citizens, what do we do with all the infrastructure that's already there. So that is then the step 2. But the step 1 of adapting and taking adaptive measures, I think we're still far, far behind it as well. So I'll try to jump through it. So again, it goes back to giving green spaces, more and more green spaces and blue spaces as well. So if you look at the world now, remember how all the conversation was about, let's make this green, let's make that green, but I think now the world is going towards making the world blue and green. So also keeping the water streams, water channels, the rainwater, perennial streams, drains, whatever that there were in place already, not compromising on that, leaving them into the environment and making them a part of the environment and keep making it more blue and green so that people could interact with nature more and more. This is a picture that I found online for Lahore, and I think this is where my area of expertise then comes in. And that is that management of, so what you see here is something that I actively speak against, and that is plastic pollution, I think, on top. And everywhere else in the world, solid waste is solid waste and wastewater is wastewater. In countries like Pakistan, they aren't mutually exclusive. So it's like you're talking about one, but the other comes in. So if it's a drain, if it's a stream for rainwater, suddenly you realize that when it doesn't rain, it's filled with all the rubbish because it's easier for people to just dump the rubbish on. And then similarly, all that solid waste that goes uncollected then chokes our drainage systems. And that has indirect effects in the monsoon season. So every year you would see the governments cleaning the streams or cleaning some sort of drainage system, but not thinking long term. They don't think about improving the solid waste collection system so that the waste doesn't find its way to the water stream at all. And same goes for wastewater as well. So it is, of course, not clean, not easy, not healthy for consumption or use, but we are using it. So I think now, instead of the infrastructure that we are talking about, can also go to building infrastructures for proper waste management system and proper wastewater treatment system. And that will clearly isolate our wastewater streams from the freshwater streams. So when rainwater comes, when it has a separate stream to go, and when it can recharge on our groundwater, it would more be a blessing rather than disguise. So doing all this against monsoon is, I was thinking monsoon is not a monster. It's us building all these big buildings without thinking where, if it ever rains, the water would go. So we create that situation for ourselves. It is not the water. So yeah, so I think for me, that would be the top priority, to build proper mechanisms and infrastructures to deal with certain things and give nature the way it used to operate. Just let it operate the way it used to operate. Don't hinder any natural drains that were there. Are we all right?
Thank you, Dr. Saiba. That's perfect timing, actually. Thank you so much. I'm struck by the photographs. Certainly, and struck by just how fast the city of Lahore has grown in the last, well, since partition. I mean, it was a city of 800,000 people at the time of partition, and now it's a city of approximately 10 million people stretched over 1,700 square kilometers of land. And when you think about then how rapidly this infrastructure, water connections had to be set out to provide basic services of water connections and sanitation to residents and to areas, and how that's been done in a third world country, in a city that is, you know, routinely financed through provincial government grants and without its own finances, that this is as much a question of infrastructure as it is about governance as well. So Zahid Sahab, I understand you were going to talk to us about the monsoon and some of the challenges that you face at VASA.
Includes these 7 things. What is the monsoon pattern in Pakistan and Lahore, worldwide also, and then what should be the standard practice to manage this rain spells in the monsoon season, then the existing structure of sewerage, and the 4th one is the existing stormwater drainage structure, and then proposed the planned structures for the Lahore for sewerage improvement and proposed stormwater drainage infrastructures. Some are proposed and some are rather in the pipelines. And then the constraints. Next, I'm not used to of using this. It makes life easy. In Pakistan, we face 2 kinds of rains. Number 1, the winter rains, the rains which are not the rains, monsoon rains come from July to September, but the rest of the year we face westerly wind rains. And westerly wind rains, you don't see any issue in the winters and in the the other than monsoon periods. The things are just like as in Europe, because these are European rains. Yes. So we don't even establish any camps in VASA also for the westerly wind rains. In the winter, you do not see any media coverage or any road submerged in water, because this is not monsoon. Monsoon starts from 1st July to end September, and 35 are the rainy days in Lahore. So when we plan about rainwater harvesting and other things, we should keep in mind that we are talking about 35 days out of 365 days. And then low-lying areas which are already there in Lahore, because water knows one thing, that it travels towards the lowest point. You don't have to tame water. You just if there is some place which is lower than the rest of the places, the water will automatically find its way towards that place, and that is called the ponding area. The Asian monsoon phenomena is in many other countries as well, but Asian monsoon is spread into Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Thailand, Myanmar, and these few countries, they encounter this monsoon pattern. And these are the standard the dates which are, you can say, scheduled dates. Generally these vary by 1 week or some days. The monsoon comes from bottom to top. The sea is on the bottom, and then you can see the date 20th May, the first line, red line in the bottom. So 20th May the monsoon is here, and then 25th May the monsoon travels further towards the land area. Sri Lanka, it crosses Sri Lanka on 25th May, and on 1st June it enters India, and after 1 month, the second top line, 1st July, it enters Pakistan. So we generally face monsoon season from 1st July onwards. And then there is a phenomenon of withdrawal of monsoon. It starts from 1st September and it ends by middle of September, and generally we also see weak monsoon currents by 30th September or 1st October, as we experienced a few days ago. So this is general monsoon pattern. And impacts of this monsoon, you can see same situation everywhere because these are the monsoon rains. Colombo, Maharashtra, Dhaka, Pattaya, and then we can see Lahore also, and other cities of Pakistan wherever the monsoon goes. We see flash flooding, urban flooding. This is annual data, the maximum rain on a particular day. So you can see the pattern is not fixed. Sometime in July, since last year, last year you see 250 and 288 mm in July, first week or second week of July. But 3 years ago, on 2nd September, it was 96 mm on a particular day. But there were few years which were having 49 mm or 80 mm. But these 2 years, this year 19 and 2018, we had more rains on a particular day. Because generally in whole season we get 350 mm or up to 400 in the whole 3 months. But in these particular days we got these rains. In one day we got 288, which was almost 90% of the total spell, which was expected in 3 months. And on 3rd July 18, we required 6 hours to get this water clear. And this year on 16 July, we required 5 hours. Generally, whenever the rain stops, VASA forecasts on the media that so many hours will be required to get this water cleared. The same data you can see here. Generally, the word over, these are the patterns to handle rainwater. It goes into ground, underground, through infiltration where we have open lands. It is transported through drains to the water bodies like rivers. And then rainwater storage is also a concept. And then rainwater infiltration into groundwater, which is called harvesting, is also one of the way forward. And then on right side of the slide, you can see the reuse of rainwater for many other purposes, washrooms, toilet, and gardenings, sprinkling, car washing. These things may happen at the smaller scale as well as bigger scales. These are the tanks, actual pictures of Japan, household type storage, as my colleague was mentioning. And then infiltration tanks to take this water into ground through the street pondings. These are the infiltration strategies, but every city is different every city is different from the other city. The soil, the type of infiltration available, groundwater. So all these parameters differ from cities to one solution is not for every city. And then these are the parameters we need to have to get the water into the soil. We need to have certain permeability or infiltration rate available with the soil, otherwise water cannot go down. And then if you want to have some inverted well to take water into soil, groundwater, it has to be 2 feet above the water table. We don't want to pollute our water table, which is very precious and very good quality groundwater. And then the storage facilities, detention ponds, and these can be ponds or the storage pipes, blind pipes, both sides blind. A few pictures. These are the open storages. And you will be glad to know that this year we are constructing at Lahore also one of these facilities at Lawrence Garden, because we have a low level road at Lawrence, near Lawrence Garden, near Lahore Board of Intermediates. And that is the place where water from 5 roads come. Even the Charing Cross water and the China Chalk and all sides, the water is, the first thing water does is to travel to this point. We'll have a storage there this year, so that water is not on road but it is in storage. It will be having capacity of 1 million gallons. Then you can have sports facilities, lower level than the ground. The bottom one is the pipe, which is storage pipe below the roads. In Tokyo, they have constructed these pipes below the roads. These are the storage pipes. The upper pipe is drain and the lower one is the storage. In Paris, they also have a storage facility below the road. Every road, beneath the road, they have a storage pipe. And this is actual picture of Kawasaki city of Japan. This is, you can see how big is the storage. It depends how much resources we have, how much return period of the rain we want to cover. If you want to cover a return period of 50 years, you need to have bigger storage. If you want to design for small return period of a rain, then smaller will be enough. So this is the actual picture of the storage. You can well imagine that such a huge investment is involved in this kind of structure, and this is another way of expressing the same concept. There is a city and then you have a storage, and then they take out water when needed through pumping. Different kind of storage facilities worldwide. In Lahore, this is our system. Before creation of Pakistan, the green lines were the sewerage system installed in British period. All roads which are named after British, McLeod Road, Davis Road, Edgerton, and Bhatti, and all these places, the sewage lines are there in green color, and then they had a pumping station which is called outfall pumping disposal station at the periphery near Sant Nagar, Lahore, near Sagiam Bridge. This was the structure, and then 50 to 70 this structure expanded a bit. Gulberg added into areas developed for residential purpose in the city. And then by 90 we had some more expansion of network. And then 91 to 2000 we have this pink color infrastructure. You can see in the northern Lahore, which is upper side of the map, there was good investment made for rainwater drainage during this period. It was through a World Bank financing. And on left side bottom, we got some infrastructure for near the Johor town and the Raivan Road, these areas. And then 2008, this addition was made. 18. So you can see from this analysis that before independence, 1.5% of the total infrastructure was there, and the maximum investment into infrastructure was made between 71 and 90. This is the period when Lahore Development Authority was established, VASA was established, and a big infrastructure was laid. And then by in next decade of 91, 2000, 31% infrastructure, and in the rest of the period we don't see any big investment and the extension in infrastructure. In the central Lahore we are still working with the British period infrastructure. So this is the, and now there is a proposal because vertical development is taking place in this southern part of Lahore, Gulberg, Garden Town. All these areas are being developed vertically, and the infrastructure here is for residential sewerage load. Because the main boulevard of Gulberg, the sewerage was laid by in 70s, early 70s or late 60s, when Gulberg area was developed for residential purpose only. But now it's not a residential area. So therefore we have a project, this one, which is, there are more lines because I have only 3-4 minutes left. So ultimately this water infrastructure has to be laid by spending 26 billion of rupees. And this year LDA is kind enough to provide this money, because previously we were looking towards government only, but now LDA is taking a lead that they can use their properties and they can sell some of the plots to raise this money. And then this is another infrastructure in southern Lahore which requires more money, 37 billions. This is Iqbal town. You can see a nala or drain at Iqbal town, this one. And this drain shouldn't carry the sewage, domestic sewage. It should carry only stormwater. So therefore, in parallel, this line will be constructed at the cost of about 4 billion. And the pumping station at the terminal point. So all these plans are there and in pipeline. This one is first in kind in Pakistan. This project, this is laying of sewer line through tunnel boring machine without digging. So a jack machine will be used to install this pipe in the central Lahore, which is having British period sewerage system. So the project is approved by central CDWP last week, and next week the ACNEC may approve it. Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank project. 14 kilometers of the sewer line will be installed in the central part, because we do not want to dig the roads and we don't want to spoil the infrastructure of the city. So this will be no dig technology, and central Lahore inundation will be reduced. And then stormwater network, you can see 124 kilometers of main drains we have in the city. And this is the flow pattern. These are again not meant to carry sewage, domestic sewage. These are meant for stormwater drainage only. So after the previously mentioned project, tunnel boring project, the central drain of the city, which is Zafar Ali Road, Shadman, Samnabad, this drain will no longer carry the domestic sewage. It will be only left for stormwater drainage. No pollution anymore. And we can have some tilapia fish also in the canal, in the drain, so that dengue can be, eaten up by the fish. We have some zones, administrative zones for the drainage system, north, central, south. North was, as we mentioned, I mentioned earlier, that the north zone was improved a lot before 2000. So nowadays, whenever there is rain, you don't hear much about northern Lahore. You mostly hear about central Lahore, Lakshmi Chowk. But North Lahore is quite better now. Nakhda Chowk is no more a ponding area because of this infrastructure. So you can see the green lines. These are the smaller drains which are to be constructed only to carry stormwater into the main drain. The blue drain will be having the major chunk of water. Ultimately, the blue will be the bigger one, and green small drains will carry water, only road runoff and the surface water into. So this will be not odor or something. It will not be wastewater. It will be rainwater only. Then South Lahore. So plans are there. This is Laurus Road project, which I mentioned earlier. The yellow line junction is the point where the water accumulates, and right side the garden, and we will have storage tank to carry 1 million gallons of water. But still, about 70 millimeter of rain will be stored here. If it rains more than 70 mm, there will be some water on the road. So we have some limitations. We cannot design everything for indefinite amount of rain. The final slide. So financial issues, of course, for implementation of these plans, we need finances. Autonomy, I am representing VASA, but I am reporting to multiple reporting channels. I cannot decide myself about these projects. I am part of LDA. LDA is my parent department. Then LDA has to go to another department, which is housing department, and they go to planning department, and then the project is fizzled out. There are so many people to comment on the project which I prepare. So autonomy and the legal framework, we need to have regulatory body to oversee my performance, and then to fix the tariff and all that. institutional alignments and all these things. Behavioral issues, as in the previous presentation, the solid waste throwing into the drains so this is a behavioral issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaid Saab, for that very comprehensive overview of Lahore and your rather ambitious plans. And before I open up to any questions, and I'd like to invite them, there is a water tank on Queens Road opposite the Lesco headquarters, Gangaram ke zamane ka. It's called the Gangaram water tank, as a matter of fact. I know precious little about it, but I think its location must have to do with the fact that it's low-lying area. And there's a whole, actually, alums graduate has been working on the entire history of how water tanks were the premier form of water storage and drinking water in urban areas in India before the British, and how the colonial experiment was, of many things, very much a move away from storages into canals, because the English didn't want to have this old Indian system left to dictate, and that canal se pani aana chahiye. But now it seems, with several Indian cities, including Madras, now facing severe water shortages because of expansion, that it's these old water tanks that we have to go back to. But anyway, I'm reminded, wo jagah bhi abhi khali hai, it's still there. Yes, it's a water tank. I would like to open this panel, distinguished panel, to any questions that we may have from the audience. I'll ask you to raise your hand, identify yourself, and if you have a question for our audience members in the back, please first. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Naila. I'm a freelance writer. I contribute to the Daily Times. With reference to Dr. Fauzia's presentation, it was very interesting, particularly with reference to dealing with the monsoon, because breakdowns, when they happen, even in the most developed countries, they do cause problems, and flooding does cause breakdowns in electricity and other things. So the aspect of dealing with monsoon is very important. So I had a few questions related to that. We do see that in Lahore, some areas are particularly more vulnerable to monsoon than the others. Like there's disparity in terms of regions. Some localities, maybe low-income localities, are more vulnerable. So to both the panelists, I would like to ask if we can protect somehow the more vulnerable populations in Lahore from the impact of monsoon. Another related question to that would be the health impacts of monsoon, or like we are having disease outbreak in terms of dengue or other pandemics, how we can actually try to help the population and protecting them from the health impacts of monsoon. And thirdly, coming to the management aspect of monsoon, do we have enough human resource, or do we have enough engineers or solid waste management experts or urban planners who can actually suggest us to better empower our government in terms of service delivery? And if there's anything you could suggest for Karachi, because the impact is much more serious and the damage is much more serious in terms of electrification and in terms of life loss. So, both the panelists can respond to that. Thank you.
And first question was about the people living in the areas which are vulnerable. So, yeah, actually, as I mentioned earlier, the water flow direction is towards the low-lying areas, not the low-income areas. So, the first thing is the water doesn't know which area is high-income area. So, luckily, in all bigger rains which we experienced in the city, we only mostly we saw the inundation of the roads. Mostly water into the houses, luckily up to 288 millimeter of rain, the houses means we I mean the quality of life which disturbs the quality of life. For example, there are some areas in Shah Jamal which is a high income area, but you get water in their lawns and their garages during rain. But there are some low income areas in walled cities. Walled city is a low income within the walls, but you don't experience any water into a house because it is a high elevated area. And same because it is high elevation, because the British constructed and even before British, the city parts, the strategic buildings, the important living places. You can see the Government College Lahore, Mayo Hospital, High Court. All premises were higher than the surrounding places. So the population concentrations are higher in the old part of Lahore, and low income groups are also in the northern Lahore and the walled city parts. And fortunately, they are not hit as much as the high income areas, but in the low elevation, most affected, because as I mentioned, residential are converted into. So this was the first part probably. Third was dengue. So you please.
Agree with you on the poor and the marginalized getting affected from any weather conditions, because I think the rich can still afford to hire a pump or something and get rid of it. They can still afford to call the army and let them take care of it. But I think it's directly the poor who are always affected by it, especially if you look at the settlement systems. A lot of poor people live by the sides of Ravi. Now, why do they live by the sides of Ravi? Because access to water is a basic right, and elsewhere it would be difficult for them. So they find their ways closer to canals, closer to rivers. And to emphasize on your point on health, I think already they're so vulnerable with or without monsoon. Monsoon only adds on to the effect, but the way all these streams are polluted, all the industrial waste that finds its way, already it's down the stream. So of course upstream there's a lot of agricultural waste, etc., that becomes a part of it if they're using any form of fertilizers, etc. But even within the city, within Lahore, the amount of industrial waste that enters these drains and then eventually Ravi, and I cannot imagine those people using that water that for sure contains heavy metals, for sure contains all the toxic components. So I think health-wise we've done poorly, and monsoon will only show us, maybe of course with the flies and the water remaining stagnant, there will be other aspects of it. But generally in terms of health of the marginalized and the poor, we've done terribly, and I think we'll continue to do terribly on that. So I think that's another aspect for the government to think about, that yes, there will be infrastructures, but what about those who cannot afford infrastructures, those who will continue to live there because they don't have any alternative means. So creating those economic opportunities. So I would very much relate the vulnerable and the health aspect to it, because then how many health facilities do we have for them, for example? And I am glad that you mentioned Karachi, because I'm recently studying Karachi, just pulling out facts and figures from here and there, and it's alarming, like the way we are managing our cities. So for example, in the presentation we saw that there was very clear division between stormwater drains and sewerage drains, whereas we know in reality that there's no distinction between any drain that we see. So whether that is a drain that is passing by Lahore, or that is the Hadyara drain or anything else, everybody just thinks it is convenient for them to put anything, not solid waste, but at least the municipal waste, or whatever they can, to just throw it into, it's like easy traveling path for them. So coming back to Karachi, like the mismanagement, the level of mismanagement that cities have. So I was looking at the amount of wastewater that they produce. So it was, I think the difference was that they're only able to treat 150 million gallons of water per day, wastewater, whereas the actual wastewater produced is 550 million gallons. So if you are sending 400 million gallons, 400 plus million gallons of water into the Indus every day, like we don't even come close to this privilege of sitting on chairs and talking, because we're the biggest mismanagers. So for us to sit like how did you plan your city? How did you allow this much growth? And if you allowed this much growth, why couldn't you? If housing authorities and housing societies are taking care of the housing, they could as well take care of the, so creating smaller cities within cities, take care of the wastewater as well, take care of the solid waste as well. And I think the same would go for industrial states, that if you have an industrial state, why cannot they take care of all these things and make sure that the stormwater drains remain separate from the sewage drains, and all the many managerial things that are so simple. So generally I and I always say this, that I would have loved to give a technical question, but to every problem in Pakistan, the answer is so simple. It's like I did not need a PhD for this. It's very basic. So yeah.
I'll come to you.
Hi. Hi. You mentioned this technology, this method called the no-dig technology to dig up the canal. Could you highlight this? What exactly is that? It seems like a new term. The Maratab, you have mentioned financial issues, autonomy, legal and institutional and behavior issues. How about experts? How many experts does VASA have on board? This is, I mean, we suffer. And why are we suffering? All these issues, let's be positive. Maybe it will take another 20 years for these issues to be resolved. Why are we being punished?
Okay.
And the blame, just let me complete. And the blame partly goes to VASA. And how many experts you have, even our urban planners, they are least bothered about how to design a greenhouse. Water retention, rainwater, it's not even expensive. I mean, if you're going to spend $500,000 in a house, you can easily buy a system for $10,000 that will be able to store 1,000 liters of your rainwater to start off.
Okay, so two questions. First one, the no-dig technology, which was the easier question for me. In this technology, there are 3 or 4 kinds of mechanical ways to accomplish this task. One is the horizontal directional drilling. This machine is used where we don't need any gradient. You know, if you have pressurized pipe, we want to lay below the ground without digging, will require horizontal directional drilling machine, which will drill a hole horizontally and then pull back the pipe, and there is no level an issue. So pressurized water will pass through the pipe regardless of the level, because pressurized pipe. But in the sewerage lines, we have 2 constraints. One, we need to be having the sizes increased with the passage of by the distance. If it passes to somewhere, it goes to terminal point, it gradually increases in size, because the more areas are connected with the same pipe. So number 1, and number 2, it needs a gradient or the level difference so that the water is transported downwards. For this, the tunnel boring machine or micro tunneling technology is required. In this way, you dig a hole, one hole, a room, you dig a room and then place your machine and then jack pipes, and the machine, the auger, which there are many methods, auger boring and the many methods to bring back the soil to place the pipe in, and then one pipe length is entered, pushed into the soil, then the second one after connection, the second one goes in, then the third one. And after about 1 kilometer, or it depends on the technology and the machine, we need another hole to be dug, and then another kilometer. And then there is another option, you can cast your pipes inside the system also. Instead of pushing the pipes can be constructed also within the dug area. So, but we are using the technology for pushing the pipes, jacking the pipes, 1 kilometer, then 1 kilometer. After 1 kilometer, there will be a hole dug. But during for this project, there is a flexibility, because this is happening for the first time in country. So the contractor will have the liberty, they can even use 2 km long length for if the machine is good enough. So this is one, the answer to no dig technology. The second one is the experts. You see, you are saying that all these issues are creating problem for the public, of course, and luckily none of the problem is connected with VASA. You can see in this list of the issues, financial issue, autonomy, I cannot provide autonomy to myself. Legal framework, the law, the act, the regulatory structure, institutional alignment, behavior, but I can only answer about the expertise available within the organization. We in VASA have mostly we are engineering organization, of course, so the financial, the other the revenue collection and other HR people are there also, but our primary job is to do engineering relating with water. I myself am a sanitary engineering from Netherlands. Director planning is sitting, he is also from sanitary engineer from Netherlands. There are 3 engineers who are there to do masters in Paris nowadays. They will be coming back. So about 20 to 30% skilled staff is foreign trained, and almost most of them, 50% plus people, have been into foreign utilities. They have worked on the job in many Japanese utilities, English utilities. So the exposure and the knowledge is not, we are not short of these things. That's why the projects are planned and these are well crafted and drafted, as I explained, the projects and the solutions. We know the solutions, but these things which are listed mostly relate with other people.
My name is Zafar Sabri. I'm Managing Director, Innovative Consultants. One quick comment on what Rizai Saab said. Financial issues. They are not entirely exogenous. I think VASA itself is also responsible for some of them. The unaccounted for water, I think that is the main reason that VASA is running in loss. So I think that is something that could be done and can be done at VASA's level. So that is just a quick comment. But I have a few more comments and questions. This was just a quick one, as you said that this is external, but this is partially external. If I correctly remember, so you have a loss of something like 5,000 million rupees per annum, and dependent entirely on grants from the government of Punjab. So you will still remain dependent upon those grants. You will remain dependent upon those grants, but of course you can minimize the grants that you require. So that is just the financial part. I think we have discussed mainly the monsoon patterns, and you did touch upon what we now call climate extreme events. This is a relatively new phenomenon, about a decade or so old, where you get, as much rainfall in a single storm that you used to get in 1 month. So it by far exceeds the monthly average. And that, I think, is a big challenge for the drainage engineers. So how to drain a very flat city in the aftermath of a climate extreme event. Now, the solutions that you have elaborated upon, they are city-wide solutions, of course, and they are extremely important, macro level solutions. But there are spots which you cannot drain by gravity. And being a very flat city, you have to pump several times before the final disposal, which requires a lot of electricity consumption. And this is the electricity wires which generally, they deceive us during rains. There's no electricity, so you have to depend upon fossil fuels. Now, one of the solutions that comes to mind is that of what we call injection wells. Lahore is facing a twin problem. It is facing a drainage problem. At the same time, it is facing an aquifer depletion problem. So if we, on the low-lying areas, the few spots that you identified, if you construct these injection wells, they would get water very quickly at those spots, and that can be taken down to the aquifer for the recharging of the aquifer. Of course, there are concerns that we want to maintain our aquifer clean, but there are ways to do that, desilting chambers and so on, and also grease traps, etc., so that we only inject clean water into the aquifer. I think this was a proposal in the VASA water supply drainage master plan, in which I also worked on. So that could not be implemented yet in VASA. But in my voluntary capacity, in Model Town where I live, so we have constructed about 5 injection wells, and you are very welcome to visit them. They are essentially designed to cater at a micro level, but they did help in reducing the depth and duration of inundation on certain low-lying areas in Model Town. So that is a solution I'm just going to finish in a minute. There's a solution which addresses the twin problems. It addresses the problem of drainage, and it also addresses the problem of aquifer recharge. Thank you.
So first question was unaccounted for water, which is equivalent of line losses in electricity distribution system. So line losses have to be reduced so that we can become more financially efficient. But we are talking about capital expenditures. This is operational expenditure. We can maximize our income and reduce our losses. This is very good. We have to be sure, and we have to install meters on both sides so that we actually know what is the unaccounted for water. Supply side meters, consumer meters, 100%. Of course, this is important. But for the capex, the things which require huge infrastructure investments, probably this will not be enough to control the losses in water distribution system. The pumping and electricity during rains, we have covered all the pumping stations through generators, because we know that first thing happens during rain is the electricity shutdown. So whenever there is a rain, the electricity is shut and our pumping system switches over to generators. But this interesting proposal about inverted wells or the wells to recharge the aquifer. There are few things which we have to discuss as water professionals and the other stakeholders, that our groundwater is very precious, and very luckily it's very good. And the myths about the arsenic contamination are also myths only. In Lahore, very interesting this point, that the arsenic myth which was created a few years ago is no more a myth, no more an issue for the city. The paper 2 years ago, the Swiss Technical Publishing Institute published a paper which was picked up by WHO also. It carried information about whole of Pakistan arsenic issue, and including Lahore. And we at VASA, we contacted that magazine and the institute which published the paper, that from where you got this arsenic concentration data. You have to find, to check the arsenic concentration, there are many methods. Strip method, which is the crudest one, you just dip a strip and color change will be indicating the level, which is not very accurate. And then atomic absorption method, which is dependent on the skill of operator. If somebody, the same apparatus can give 2 results, if there are 2 operators. And then ICP method, which is more accurate. So all these things we checked from them, from where they got the data and what method they adopted. And they responded that we got this data from ComSat Islamabad. Professor A, they named the professor also, that you contact him because he provided us this data. And VASA contacted that particular professor sahab and asked for the coordinates and the places from where they got water sampling done in the city of Lahore. He couldn't provide us the coordinates, and he finally admitted that the data was collected from elsewhere, not from the VASA tube wells. So, and then we responded to original institute that your data provider is not owning the data, so you should revise your this false alarm. But this false alarm was doing very well for the international bottlers. So they were getting huge profits by selling Pakistani water to Pakistanis and taking away the money. So that's why, only because of the and the inverted well issue, that we have to be mindful about the quality of our groundwater. The other option is to store this water, because we should know that 35 are the rainy days in the city. Out of 365, 330 days are dry days. So if we some infrastructure, some inverted wells were constructed at Johor Town, Greenbelt, Tajpura and some other places, and as you said that we need to have some filtration done before the water goes into soil, and then these pebbles and the filters were choked because of the dry scenario for the most of the year, and then water could not get through. And the second option is to store this water, because ultimately we have to take out the same water for other uses. So why not store in a shallow place? Because this water is available, instead of sending it back to groundwater and then again pumping out for other uses, we may store it at the shallow level, below the playgrounds, below the parks, below any place, and then we take it out.
Zaid, I wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of responsibility that's being ascribed to VASA. कि आप ये क्यों नहीं करते, आप वो क्यों नहीं करते? But you're a water and sanitation agency. Your primary responsibility is to provide water connections and then to take the sewage water and provide sanitation services as well. But what I wanted to ask you in these responsibilities is that some of them are getting confused. You have a responsibility to provide drinking water to Lahoris, and the source of this drinking water is primarily groundwater. But there has been a raft of legislation in the last 15 years which has confused the ownership and responsibility of it. So you have the local government, Metropolitan Corporation that's responsible, you're responsible, the irrigation department is responsible, and now I understand this Punjab Abe Park, or Papa as it's now known, is responsible. So how does this make your responsibility more challenging?
First, I think there is a big difference between Karachi and Lahore. In Lahore, you have a person sitting here answering all the questions about rains, water, sewage. In Karachi, you cannot figure out who is the real authority, responsible authority or institution. Even during the rains, you cannot figure out whether it is Karachi Water and Sewerage Board, whether it is MCK or any other organization. Who is the real? So you cannot figure out there. But luckily, we have some organization here who are responding the questions. You are asking about point number 3, which is a big, you can say in your language, legislative mess, which is almost created and also under creation. We have 4 laws for doing the same thing. Number 1, irrigation also have a law which controls all the groundwaters in the province, and then VABDA Act which controls groundwaters in the province and the country, and then Water Act which is with the assembly for passing, cleared from all stages. It gives again control to irrigation department. Then there is Local Government Act 2019 which gives control to local government and community development department of water supply, sewerage and groundwater rights also. Then there is PAPA, Punjab Abe Park Authority Act which enables this authority to control all the groundwater abstractions, and also it is mentioned in the same act that water supply in the whole of province is the responsibility of Papa. So it means, so I can very easily get away by saying that I am not responsible, Papa is responsible. And now there is another law which is under, they are preparing or, drafting a law which is called Water and Sanitation Authority Punjab Law. So they will be supplying water other than drinking water. So we need to align all these laws. Very good question, but I don't have answer.
The VASA is operating because there are all these other entities clamoring for power and funding. Do we have another question from the audience? Dr. Saab, Zarur.
It's nice to see I'm being educated more. See, I just want to know that how extensive is your storm water drainage system. You see, you were saying that you have separated the sewerage drainage and the storm water. You see, so how extensive is that? I mean, how much area have you covered? You see, for that, because that's a very important development. You see that you have separated these two. You see.
Actually, we for stormwater separation and from the sewerage, we are not able to do it so far to separate. For that, we have the projects. First one is in the pipeline, but actually we are also responsible. But at the same time, as an organization, we are the victims of many other things which are contributing this kind of stagnation and the stormwater ponding issues. For example, if a new road is constructed, the first VASA people, we start praying that we pray that they do not create a dip in the road, they do not make a level which is not favorable for water drainage. We also pray that they construct a road water drainage system along the road which also takes water into the ultimate terminal body. For example, Gulberg road, when it is constructed, whenever it is constructed, they will construct a drain along the road. But the drain will end as the road ends. It will not go anywhere. And then VASA will be in, you can see Katera or whatever. So we will be responsible, as my friend was saying, that every citizen is worried.
Isn't it part of the SOPs? Whenever you give a construction of the road, you see, it should be part of that SOP.
Everything should be, you are very right that there should be integration of everything. For example, if metro bus is being constructed or metro train, there is a plan of VASA to construct a drain from point A to B, and in between this point A and B there is a train constructed. So drain is compromised and train is there. So all the, and at the end of the day, when there will be water not passing through this passage, it will be VASA responsible.
Rafi, only if there is time to have another question. My name is Soheb Anwar. I work for WWF at the freshwater program. Sir, I was very fascinated by your trend that you showed about during the 1970s when there was this huge amount of investment being made, and we saw this great deal of development happening, but then gradually that shrunk down as well. My question to you was that how much the development of Lahore as such, because back in 1970s you see that the population was very low as well as compared to what we're seeing now. How much do you think that the overall population growth and the development that Lahore has gone through has impacted the service delivery of VASA as well as the impact on the entire freshwater system of the city?
Whenever an infrastructure is constructed, there is a design horizon and design period for which it can sustain the load. The infrastructure which was, we should be thankful to our elders, decision makers, or the whoever was responsible to make this system in 70s and up to 1990. Because of that system, we are still getting benefit of that system. And the last intervention, major intervention was made before 90, after 70. And that design horizon was up to 2018, the design period of the particular pipe size or the pumping station or whatever was constructed, and it could sustain till now. Because today we are sitting on, you can see all the roads are dry, but there is 500 million gallons of water per day flowing below the roads, even without the rain, because 11 million people are using water every day, and they are using 70 gallon per capita per day, and the roads are still dry, which means 50 crore of gallons of water per day is going out of the city through pumping, through pipes. So all this infrastructure is working, but the issue is when there is a rain, the same system also caters the rain, and then we need some hours. And still we are lucky at Lahore, comparing with other cities of Pakistan, especially Karachi, that we can predict and forecast that this much is the rain, and how many hours, so many hours will be required to clear the city, and we prove that in those particular hours we clear the city. So we are better off comparing with other cities, but of course the infrastructure revamping and the augmentation is very important. It's old infrastructure, and we are lucky that our elders were quite good decision makers. They were not investing over the roads, they were also investing below the roads.
So I'm going to make use of this privilege and ask you a question. So in case of Lahore, you said you're going to build this stormwater drain. Let's say that in the next 3 years it doesn't rain at all. Your stormwater drainage project has reached a feasibility stage and you have to implement it, and suddenly there is a water issue. And this is of course a climate change problem. Let's say that you do not receive a lot of rain. How, as decision makers, do you then take decisions? Do you continue with your sewage or stormwater project or not? And then also I would like to know what compromises are you making on the quality of wastewater? Like how much treatment is VASA?
The design parameter, because of the inadequacy of the underground piping system, the open channels are being used for to carry this sewage, of course. So that's why this project will enable us to dry up these open channels from this wastewater. So the central Lahore open channels or open drains will be free from sewage. So even if there is no rain at all, but we'll have empty and remodeled open channels. Benches will be placed on the channels because there will be no more wastewater there. Zafari Road, you can imagine Zafari Road and Shadman, Ganda Nala, if it dries up and clean water of the rain is there, and people will be enjoying life there without odor. So this is something which is, even there is no rain, we need this kind of thing to augment our system. And the wastewater treatment, our friends and Rafi Alam also knows, if we go for the 100% treatment, 100 billion rupees, but still we have recently achieved by the courtesy of Dr. Saab and him that we are trying to have a low cost solution, and we have agreed with NIBG, National Institute of Genetic and Biological Engineering, instead of spending 100 billion rupees which are required to treat all water, we will be using some plants on small scale project.
Manageable, thank you. You know, I was in Karachi some weeks ago, और वहाँ कोई 20 मिनट बारिश हुई थी, and I was stuck in the rain for 2 hours afterwards. I was going to a dinner, and फिर वहाँ खाने पे सारों ने मौके फिर बताया कि जी वो 1990 में बारिश हुई थी तो मेरी गाड़ी बह गई, फिर हाँ 15 साल पहले ये हुआ मुझे याद है. And as a proud Lahori, you know, it's shocking that people live in such a vulnerable city as Karachi.
But it's as much the intensity of the monsoon as it's been the growth of the city as well. And I think one of the things that I've certainly taken away from today's talk, other than the serious health issue that stagnant water and the monsoon creates in urban flooding, is the immense challenge VASA Lahore has in front of us and how it's doing in addressing that challenge. This is an organization that has challenges in law. Nobody pays for water and sanitation in Lahore. Koi meter to hai hi nahi na, so it has revenue issues. Thankfully, it doesn't have capacity issues. I can testify to the fact that they are very hardworking and dedicated people in VASA. But it shows you just how badly our city is governed. कि पिछले 10 साल में सिर्फ 3% वाटर एंड सैनिटेशन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ऐड हुआ है ऑफ द ओवरऑल. तो पिछले 10 साल में तो ये सड़कें बना रहे थे और टाउन हाउसेज, ये हाउसिंग सोसाइटीज़ बना रहे थे. And it's that expansion, that sort of cement, the urban heat island that's being generated by all this cement that's creating extra runoff and creating the stormwater surges that we're seeing in the city. And you're right, there's no connection. जब LDA एक private housing scheme को या अपनी joint venture scheme को या अपनी scheme को launch करती है, it's not really in conjunction with VASA. There's just a bunch of documentations that the property developer has to put in along with a statement कि हाँ जी हम trunk sewer तक एक drain बना देंगे. It makes it your problem, essentially. And in these very difficult circumstances, planning for a city that's suffering climate change is very difficult. My friend Danish Mustafa says that it's next to impossible because a lot of water engineering is based on averages. कि जी पिछले 10 साल कितनी बारिश हुई, पिछले 15 साल कितनी 45 दिन बारिश होती है. But averages are no longer reliable in the time of climate change. So you're posed with this additional challenge in managing this immensely large city that with very short and scant resources, you can't build a city to be resilient to a 500-year monsoon. It's just not economically feasible to design it that way. So there are certain risks that our own capacities bring with us and certain challenges, but I'm glad that we have a fantastic team working on it. I want to thank Zaid Saab and Dr. Fauzia for taking the time out to speak to us, and all of you for joining us here at the Consortium for Development Policy Research, and for the team who organized it. Thank you all very much for coming. Ji, aapka bahut bahut shukriya.